Mindset RX podcast. My name is Tom Foxley and I help functional athletes gain a champ's mindset. On today's show, I'm going to be discussing 4 things you need to understand about mindset to become the best athlete possible. Before we do that, I just want to kind of drop in that in the free Facebook group that Mindset RX / myself hosts, which is called Mindset for Functional Athletes, there is I'm putting together an entire training on hearing your inner athlete better and ultimately becoming a better version of yourself through mastering your mindset. It's basically extrapolated straight from the Mindset RX coaching certification and the inner athlete performance camp I run, and it's just a very small section, but I think it's probably the most impactful, if that's a word, section that there is. So if you'd like to become part of that, then you've got to head over to Facebook and search for Mindset for Functional Athletes, or if you search for Mindset RX, there's a link around there, or you can just find me on socials and I'm sure I'll redirect you. But I think the easiest way is facebook.com and then, or facebook.com, I'm such a desktop user, get on Facebook, search for Mindset RX, and it's a completely, what's the right way of saying this, inclusive, supportive environment with 0 dickheads in there, which I think is a massive benefit. So get in there, find all what it's all about, and I'll hopefully see you on the other side. And there's going to be that 5-part training series, which is a complete guide on hearing your inner athlete speak, hearing the different voices they have, and kind of seeing how that dictates your behavior. So the 4 things you need to know about mindset in order to become the best athlete possible. The first one is we're actually going to start with a problem. And the problem is it's such a widespread problem that I'm sure you'll identify it straight away, even if you've never thought about it in these terms before. And the problem is the reason that you're not achieving the things that you want to achieve. The problem I'm about to speak about is so widespread, it's not even considered a problem. And in fact, some people only consider it the only way to achieve what you want to achieve. And it's this. When we want to affect our outcome, we logically and kind of rightly to a certain extent believe that we have to change our behaviors. It makes sense. In order to change what we achieve, we must perform different behaviors. It's very simple and you cannot argue with that logic. That's not the problem. The problem comes when we take out the human factor, or we neglect the human factor. Because remember, and if you can hear an ice cream van, I can apologize. All the windows are closed, but it's still getting in here somehow. Anyway, the problem comes when we take out the human factor, and that human factor is the thing that leads us to self-sabotage and essentially not perform the behaviors that we want to perform. Because no matter how much we desire performing the behaviors, no matter how much we need to change our behaviors, because it's a health risk or it's just not the way to self-actualizing, to becoming the best version of ourselves, sometimes we don't do it. And we've got to change whether we can perform the behavior or not. And that's where mindset comes in. I can give you all the tactics you want. You can, the analogy I always use, you can go to Julian Pineau for your strength programming and kind of structural programming. You can get someone else doing your aerobic capacity programming. They can work in unison perfectly together. You can get Jason Phillips or Rob Wolf or one of the other fantastic people that I know that you guys know too to do your nutrition program. You can have your recovery done by Brian McKenzie and Casper Van der Meulen, and you all these people. You can have all these people helping you, but if you don't have the mindset to implement it, it means fuck all. And I'll use that analogy time and time again because it just rings true. So we have to identify the reason that we're not performing the behaviors, and behaviors will only ever be a result of our thoughts and our emotional state. Which one comes first, I don't care, because it doesn't matter for the purpose of this. We can continue to work with the exercises that we can give in order to become the best version of ourselves possible. But you've got to understand that we cannot change the outcome without changing our thoughts and beliefs first. And our thoughts and emotions first. And the way we do this is by understanding our beliefs. We'll only ever think in accordance and emote in accordance to our beliefs. And our beliefs are an impact or a result of influence. But we can't get into that next I'm going to change these 4 points on the fly. And let's discuss those in more points, because I think not only am I on a flow with this, but I've been just talking about it in the Mindset RX coaching cert as well, so it's fresh on my mind. So these beliefs, let's use this as the second point. These beliefs are everything to you. They are your worldview, your Weltanschauung, as I'm no doubt butchering, which is the German, your worldview. You only ever act in accordance with these beliefs, and your beliefs can be anything from I'm not going to be good enough to this to I am good enough at this. Like from I'm destined to be overweight, or I'm destined to be a failure, to I'm destined to succeed and I'm destined to be the perfect version of myself. This kind of view of the world will dictate your actions almost entirely, and these are almost always subconscious. Let's go through some examples. The best example that you guys will resonate with is the pre-CrossFit world of strength and conditioning, where it was considered an impossibility to have an aerobic capacity and be muscular at the same time. You'll lose your gains, bro. No, that's the standards thing. So that kind of belief was dictated our entire performance as a kind of physical culture for so long, until CrossFit came along and shattered it and showed that not only can you be muscular and have an aerobic capacity at the same time, but you can be flexible, you can be powerful, you can have a great anaerobic capacity too, you can have all the other tenets of fitness at the same time, and none of them will conflict with each other. In fact, you can build them all up equally. So your beliefs will dictate your behavior, like I've said, because it dictates your thoughts and emotions. Another great example of this is to kind of go macro for a bit and to look at a huge issue. Let's just take a moment to look at, like, I think it was 400 odd years ago, when there was common knowledge, apparent knowledge. It was a common truth, is a better way of putting that, that the world was not only at the center of our solar system, but the center of our universe too. And everything in the universe rotated around the Earth. We now know this to be factually incorrect. And because of this, humanity's Weltanschauung, humanity's worldview had to change in order to fit with this new knowledge. It's dangerous when we hold beliefs. It's dangerous when we accept the world blindly without reassessing the data in front of us, because we are, let's go on to the third point, because of the product of influence. The influence here is going to be experiential. So what you experience in life is going to build up a worldview. It's like whatever happens to you, you'll learn to compartmentalize it, and you'll learn to put it in a neat little box so your conscious mind doesn't have to think about it, which in terms of evolution is a really good strategy. In terms of becoming the best version of yourself is not ideal all the time. We need to learn to question it on occasion and frequently, to be honest. Is what I've experienced really the truth? Because when we experience it and when we think about it again, like when we recollect or when we reprocess that experience as a memory, we produce chemical reactions and those, or the chemical states within our body, and that rewires our brain. So there's that part of it. There's the evolution-based fact of it as well. Evolution, like, you can't override millions of years of evolution with, like, or you can't discount millions of years of evolution even, because we are just like minds carried around in meat vehicles, and we shouldn't be willing to kind of push that to one side, and those beliefs that are associated with that are real. Like, we will learn to see the world through a negative lens because it was an evolutionarily sound tactic for so long. So I've done experience, I've done evolution. Let's do education. And education is what you're explicitly told by the media, by social media, by your friends, by your family, and by education, the education system as a whole. Because education, like, I was always told the wrong thing about muscle fibers, for example. That's the one that sticks out. But I was also educated in the way of the Church of England for such a long time. I resisted it immensely, but lots of other people that I know didn't. And that is just a result of education, that some people did and some people didn't. So I've done education, I've done experience, I've done environment, and then finally, my bad, actually, I haven't done I haven't done environment. The environment that you grow up in, the kind of what you implicitly learn or what you pick up from the outside world is going to shape your beliefs entirely. And like, just think about your parents, for example. What you pick up without them even teaching you, like stories about money, stories about wealth, stories about happiness, stories about health, stories like whatever area it is. Your parents and your home life is going to dictate this hugely. And this is just another word, like the environment is just another word for what you implicitly pick up, what isn't like explicitly told you, but what you kind of you grow from, or what you pick up from an outside state. And this leads into the fourth part, because what all this says, or what all this points to is, oh, well, if I'm just a factor of my environment, then what? Like, how do I change it? Because rightly so, unless you go to a cave, you may be thinking, unless I go to a cave and I am completely detached from humanity and any influence whatsoever, only then is it going to stop having an influence on me. Is my influence going to stop influencing me and my beliefs? So that's the only way you can get around it, because there's influence all around me. From like the places that I'm looking right now, I can see a Sainsbury's, for which everyone isn't, like who isn't in the UK. That's like a small kind of a supermarket, and it's like the concept of Sainsbury's will will kind of influence me to some degree. I'm looking to look at another brand, the story of Epiphone, like my Epiphone guitar that's just in front of me, that is going to have a certain influence on me, the emotional state attached to my guitar. If I look to the story of the books that surround me, like all these things, the fact that Harriet, my spouse, will come back in a bit and I'll speak to her, like the influence is everywhere. So I'm never going to get away from my influence. But what I can do is change the way I think and change the patterns, not through willpower, but through realizing that my beliefs are not everything. And this brings me on to my fourth point, that your mindset is not fixed in one way. And we can use the fixed versus growth mindset analogy, but one I prefer, like the science of it is, if you use a certain pathway in your mind over and over and over and over again, it will become wrapped in like something called a myelin sheath, which is like an insulating agent which protects it, which means that transmissions can go faster between that, which essentially means what you do on a regular basis becomes a habit through a very physical structure being built. And I liken it to this. Imagine you're walking through a meadow and you go from point A to point B over and over and over again. Like every day you walk from point A to point B through a meadow, and you do this 3 times a day. What you'll see is in a year's time, that path between point A and point B is going to be so well worn down that it'll be obvious where that path lays. And everywhere else in that meadow, if it hasn't been touched, even if it's been walked down once or twice, will be almost indistinguishable from everything else. But the path is very delineated, it's very clear, it's very obvious what's in front of you. So if instead of you going from point A to point B, you now decide you want to go to point C, you got to push a new path through a meadow, through a year's worth of growth at least. And whilst it's very easy, and while it may look like path A is the path to go down, you have to forge a new path. And this doesn't require willpower at all. It just requires a fact of going, okay, my beliefs don't dictate exactly what I need to do, but I am going to go this way. I'm going to try and just see what happens when I walk down towards path C. And when you do this enough, the new path becomes more clear. The new path becomes easier to walk. And like what's also important to notice is when you walk down there and back once, and then you come back the next day, that path is almost going to be imperceptibly different. Like there's no changes going to happen on that path. And there might be a few broken leaves, for example, but it's going to be a completely new experience almost to walk down that path. It's going to take time again, but slowly you do that time like enough, and eventually you build in a completely new approach to mindset and eventually your actions. And all of that is why you have to change your beliefs in order to change your actions. And that's exactly what we're doing in the Mindset for Functional Athletes Facebook group right now. So if you want to kind of work on not only identifying these beliefs, but then working to change them, you need to get into the Mindset for Functional Athletes group. So I'll put a link in the description of this podcast, so you'll be able to see it there. I think if you hit the info button, or however you do it on iTunes or wherever you're listening to it, there'll be a link there, but also get onto Facebook, search for Mindset for Functional Athletes. You'll have to apply and you'll have to go through the process, but either myself or more likely my wonderful lifesaver and event coordinator tomorrow will get you in there, and she'll accept you in, and then we'll get you enrolled in that system as soon as we can, because it's a completely supportive, fun environment where you can just be yourself and you can work on mindset without the kind of the pressure and the outside, again, influence of the negative connotations of mindset. So if you're going to be involved in that, I'd love to see you in there. If you enjoyed the show, leave a 5-star review, because you hear no one else in CrossFit talking about this shit, or at least not properly anyway. So I'd love to hear a 5-star review or see a 5-star review from it. Share it with your friends, all that kind of jazz. And make sure you like Mindset RX on Facebook and find me at Tom Foxley on Instagram.